fans, welcome back to Room 237, and this is a review kind of like my last video, which was for Lars von Trier's of Antichrist, which came out in 2009. As in, this was a film I was going to do some time ago, but I watched it once, really liked it, but really did not know what to say about it or what to take away from it. I wanted to watch it again, and I just kind of got wrapped up in other things, watched other things. So, watched it again for a second time tonight, and still loved it. I still think it's a great film. I really enjoyed it. Came out around the same time, actually. Antichrist was 2009. This was 2010. Also from a sort of experimental, maybe more artsy director. Not nearly to the extent of Von Trier, but still an auteur with his own style. And it's Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. Now, actually, this is a movie that I kind of remember when it came out. I had no interest in it. I actually didn't even think it was a horror film. I just thought it was a movie about ballet. And just ever since, whenever I thought of it, just something like the 2004 or 5, whatever year it was, Phantom of the Opera came to mind. So it was nothing I ever thought I would check out. But then, being a fan of Aronofsky, even though I do have kind of the same problems that a lot of people have, I still check out his more horror-related films whenever there is one. But also, Jay Bowman from Red Letter Media said in one of their videos that Black Swan was either his favorite film or horror film of 2010, or one of them. And anytime he says that, I race out and I check it out because we have very similar tastes, and every time I've done that, I have not been let down. And so I was very curious as to this, and I was kind of thinking, okay, Requiem for a Dream is a crazy movie in the far realms of being depressing. It's a very visceral gut punch film. His 2017 film, Mother, is very wild and crazy, but again, that to me is like the most Aronofsky film. Because, real quick, a problem that a lot of people have with Aronofsky is that they think he is very pretentious in like a film student kind of way. He has all these big ideas, and he thinks he's telling these stories in a very deep, almost poetic way. Even when you watch interviews with him, he's kind of talking about it like a pretentious film student. Like he's on some other level, and people can have a hard time reading into the meanings, like he's super deep. But Mother is very much a pretentious student film. Just a modern retelling of the Bible, and I really got that with Mother. I still like Mother. I love Requiem for a Dream. That's still my favorite. But I would say I do like this a lot more than Mother. I do think it kind of takes a couple steps into the realm of going over the top and almost to the point of kind of undoing a lot of what it's been building up to, especially towards the end. But but I really do like this movie, and I have seen The Wrestler. It's been a while, and I know he considers this to be like a companion piece because it does revolve around someone having to pull off the best kind of performance or the best act, or pretty much give it their all in their job for this one thing. And it is kind of a character study. I've heard some people say coming of age, or the transition from, of adolescence to woman. I can see that, I mostly see it as a cautionary tale about the toxicity or the destructive nature of perfection. Because you look at a Natalie Portman's character and just, well, actually, I'll get into that. But as far as the film itself, yeah, it was directed by Darren Aronofsky, stars Natalie Portman, and this is without a doubt my favorite performance of hers. I do know she's a talented actress. I've seen her in a lot of things, but she's never really been an actress that jumped out at me, like made me think, oh wow, Natalie Portman in was really great. This changed my mind about that. Uh, she won an Oscar and a Golden Globe for her performance as Nina, and I do think she deserved it. However, I do agree with a lot of other people that uh, Mila Kunis as Lily, also very very strong performance, almost you know almost a scene stealer or a show stealer, similar to like Tom Hardy in The Revenant. Excuse me, Leo won the Oscar for that, but Tom Hardy is the one that really shines in The Revenant. And I've only really seen her in comedies, so to see her do a role like this, I thought she did fantastic. Also stars Vincent Castell, who I recently talked about in Gaspar Noé's Irreversible. He gave a pretty wild, unhinged performance in that. He was great in this as the ballet director, which and one thing I'll say about him is one, his performance is great, but one thing about Vincent Cassel is, especially in this film, he has a presence to him, and especially in the very beginning of the film, or like when he first shows up, and he's kind of going around watching all the girls rehearse, and he taps the shoulders of certain ones as if to say, okay, you'll stay and rehearse. The ones I didn't, you're going to come with me. We're going to be in Swan Lake. He just radiates this aura of prestige in a very intimidating way. I thought Cassell did very well. Barbara Hershey plays Natalie Portman's overbearing, overprotective sort of stage mom, which she was also in The Entity, which I talked about recently, and she was in a movie called The Stuntman, which a friend of mine gave me months ago to check out, and I still haven't got to it. So that's coming. It's not a horror film, but it is an exploitation film. Yeah, sort of like this dancer who I think it's hinted that she got pregnant with Nina and then she had to give up her dancing career, or she never took the chances that she could have to be successful. So now she's where she is, and she's really just overbearing on Nina to, puts a lot of pressure on her. And then Wynonna Ryder plays Beth, who's the aging, uh, Swan queen or whatever, uh, of the previous performances, of Vincent Castell's main star, who's kind of forced out for a new generation and doesn't take it very well. And other than that, I mean, it wasn't written by Aronofsky. It was written by Mark Heyman, Andre Hines, and John McLaughlin. I think it was based on a story by Andre Hines, which started out as a unused script about doppelgangers and understudies, and then mixed in with influences of other plays and going in the same direction, kind of as The Wrestler, Get Black Swan. The cinematography was done by Matthew Libatique, if I pronounced that correctly. And the music was done by Clint Mansell, and the music is excellent. I mean, it's dark, it's ominous. A lot of it does have that sort of ballet kind of piano sound, but then other times, it's just that Aronofsky dark, almost like violin or a, a cello, concertos or concertos, just very dark and ominous sounding. And this was a huge hit. I mean, it was made for like $13 million, made 320 something million, nominated for 5 Oscars. Of course, Portman won. And this movie really does show the sheer brutality of the world of ballet. You wouldn't normally think of that. Uh, to the layman, it looks like you're kind of dancing around on your tiptoes, but it is this cutthroat competition for roles to get on top. Even Natalie Portman, who trained for several months. I mean, I guess she broke or cracked a rib. She suffered a concussion. I guess her toenails fell off. And that's just for a few months. I mean, imagine someone that has dedicated their life to the art of ballet. I mean, they mess their bodies up. She also lost 20 pounds for the role, and she's already a smaller actress. And I guess she kind of slipped into method acting without even trying. Which does fit in because I also see this movie as not just a cautionary tale about perfection and what it can do to you, but also maybe not just for ballet or plays, but even for films. Sometimes a certain, or any job really, you try so hard and there's so much pressure that it does consume you and take over. And the story is really... Oh, and also the end credits has like a side note for all the characters for their Swan Lake counterpart. I don't think this is Darren Aronofsky's version of Swan Lake. I don't think he's sort of remaking it or whatever. But it is telling it in a way where Swan Lake is paralleled in Nina's life. Nina is this virginal, pure, almost childlike, but extremely dedicated dancer who wants to be perfect, and she thinks that you get to the top by being perfect. And I mean, she knows the choreography, every single step, like it's nothing. And that's sort of her problem, is that she dances very textbook. She does it very well, but she does it on sort of like a technical level. She doesn't let her body free. She doesn't make it look natural. And by that I mean the character, not Natalie Portman. Which there was a controversy, side note, about whether she deserved the Oscar or not, because of how much dancing was her and how much was her dancing double. And I think Aronofsky and one of the producers says that, like 90-something percent, like a very high 90-something percent of the dancing is all Natalie Portman. And then when you look at the screen time of dancing of her versus the double, it very much is Natalie Portman doing all her own dancing, which is very commendable. Her dream is to get the role of the Swan Princess. And with this new version coming out by her company, which is run by Vincent Castell, she's able to convince him to play the Swan Princess. And I even looked up if normally the Black Swan and White Swan are always played by the same ballerina. And I guess since 1895, that is how it's been. But the movie kind of portrays it that normally that's not the thing, and now Castell's going to do this new thing where Black and White is played by the same ballerina, just to add more layers of just how complex this role is. And Nina is perfect for the White Swan. Which, I mean, I guess to preface, for those that don't know, something about, all I know is that it's by Tchaikovsky, because I do listen to classical music, but princess gets turned into a swan, has to, can only be turned back by true love, finds true love, but then that guy is seduced by the Black Swan, and so then White Swan kills herself. I'm paraphrasing. But she has a hard time pulling off the role of the Black Swan, because the Black Swan is free of all of inhibitions, seductive, free, pretty much everything she's not. Kudis, on the other hand, who plays Lily, is. And Lily kind of serves as her rival. And a lot of people have taken different things away from her character, so I'll save that for the end. But basically, throughout the film, it's just all the pressures that is just taking a toll on her mind, and eventually has a psychotic break. She starts experiencing episodes of psychosis, which, for an Aronofsky film, because of his visual flair, I guess, sounds great. And one, that is a wonderful premise for a psychological thriller. Someone who gets the role of a lifetime, the pressures of the world of getting that role and trying to perfect it, that it just completely screws with their head. But it's not as wild as, say, Requiem for a Dream or Mother. It could have been. There are some scenes that are very over the top, that are almost laughable, which I think those scenes go in to my thoughts of, well, not my thoughts, but just what I think of it, about how a role can consume someone. That being, when she starts getting like the bumpy skin, kind of like a featherless bird, and when her legs do that thing, or her neck does that, like she's turning into the swan. The skin scenes aren't that bad, because that could be like a visual hallucination. But also, there's like this rash on her back. It never says what scenes with the rash are real and what ones aren't, because we never see her scratch as like a nervous tick that she has. But like Hershey, her mother, notices, and there's this dramatic scene where she drags her in the bathroom and snips her nails so she'll stop scratching. And I thought Hershey did a great job as the overbearing mother. But a lot of the scenes are very subtle as far as kind of signs that her mind's going. Because, like, Hershey is a painter, and, like, the first thing I noticed was she walks by her mother's room and you see all these paintings. And, like, the camera doesn't draw attention to it. The music doesn't let you know it's there. But there's, like, a painting of a person, and as the camera's panning through the room, you kind of see the eyebrows go down and the eyes move in that painting, which is trippy and creepy. There are some genuinely creepy moments. And, Vincent Castell is getting more and more worried, because he just, as time goes on and as the pressure wears on her, he doesn't think she has what it takes to become the Black Swan. The reason why he gives it to her is because, it's hinted that he likes to sleep with some of his dancers to get better parts. So when she goes to ask for the role, he kisses her and just, I guess, spur of the moment, she bites his lip. And it's that flash of, letting go, being free, kind of fierceness. He decides to give it to her. But then she can't make that come out. But she also sees a doppelganger of herself, usually in black. And I mean, she's always in white or light pink. Kunis is always in black. When she sees this other version of herself, she's always in black and her hair is down. She has like this seductive look on her face. And a lot of times, Kunis will kind of become that face as well. It is a pretty graphic film, sexually. Not as graphic as, say, Antichrist, but, like there's a scene where Castell tells her that she should go home and masturbate, as if to kind of loosen up and free herself a little bit. So she does, and she gets really into it, but then she notices that her mother is asleep in the chair in her room. And that freaks her out. Also a scene when she decides to go out with Lily for drinks. Lily gives her some Molly to help loosen her up too. They go back to Nina's house. They have some fun time. Kunis goes down on her. But it's at that point she thinks Lily is trying to sabotage her. Because then, she's late the next day. Lily is made the alternate or the understudy. And she's convinced that Lily is out to get her. And, I mean, that's essentially the broad strokes of the film. I don't want to get into every scene, but there are plenty of moments, like, also, she thinks she has a hangnail, and every time I see it, it's like a ooh. Like, she starts pulling on it, and you just see the skin go all the way up the finger. Of course, it's not real. But, all the performances are solid. There are things I'm torn about. Like, yes, the scenes towards the end where she does see herself kind of turning into the Swan. Not so much the red eyes. I actually think the red eyes look pretty cool. Or the scenes with, like, the bumpy skin kind of going all over her. Because I think that kind of goes with the subtlety of, like, the pictures moving. Which happens again later. I mean, all the pictures are moving. It's a very big scene. It's kind of like a psychotic hallucination, I guess. I could go with that. But, like, when her legs bend backwards, or later on in the dressing room when her neck kind of stretches, I would say that's a bit over the top. I would say, okay, that's like an Aronofsky moment where either, I mean, some people might see it as satire, some people might see it as Aronofsky's kind of sense of humor, but with the way he talks about his films, I think he takes his movies way too seriously. Oh, also, I meant to mention, apparently, Aronofsky and Portman had talked about this movie for 10 years before it got made. Side note, I meant to mention that earlier. But, and it is all about can Portman truly let herself go. And I guess that's where sort of the coming of age, or going from adolescence to womanhood, or some people say about losing your virginity. It is hinted, even though she says she's not a virgin in the film, it is hinted that she is. therefore, making her more like the White Swan. There's even a scene where Castell decides to dance with her when no one else is around. And he starts to touch her very erotically, and she gets very into it. And then he stops to say, "That's me seducing you. You're supposed to be doing that to everyone. At least with your dancing." And she seems very upset. Also, and again, this could be a hallucination, when he sees Castell with Lily having sex. Kind of like the jealousy, and that she is seducing and tempting him so she can get the role. Because you could also see the role as becoming the princess itself, like at the end of the story. So, like, Castell is supposed to represent the gentleman, or the true love of Swan Lake. But to me, I think the movie really, I mean, the whole movie's interesting. It's all very engrossing, captivating, very engrossing. But I think after their night together of having Molly, that's when everything, like, the psychosis really starts to come more to the forefront. And I'll say spoilers here. I mean, it came out 12 years ago. It was a pretty big success. But, yeah, I'm just going to say spoilers. But, also, just to mention Wynonna Ryder, she has an accident where she's put in the hospital. Castell says she did it on purpose. But when Portman goes to deliver some of the cosmetic stuff that she stole from her dressing room, because she said she wanted to be like her, be perfect like her, Wynonna Ryder takes a nail file and starts stabbing herself in the face with it, saying that she's nothing. But then when Portman runs back to the elevator, her hands are bloody and she has the file. But then when she goes back home, I mean, these are some genuinely creepy scenes. Like, she turns the light on, and in the back corner of the room, you see, like, a bloodied Wynonna Ryder. Who, like, then when she charges at her, the reality is that it's Barbara Hershey coming at her, like, where were you? And I think that's because Wynonna Ryder and her mother are supposed to represent her future. She could either dance her way to the top and then retire and have nothing and fade away, or she, could go the route of her mother. Always wonder what could have been, not live up to her potential, and, watch other people, possibly her future daughter, have her success. Which even her mother tries to keep her from going to the actual performance at the end of the film. And I think it's because she doesn't want to see her daughter have that success. I think for her, reality set in, and she doesn't want her daughter to surpass her. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I took from it. Now, as far as the character Lily goes, I think everything we see of Lily is true up until they go out for drinks. I do think Lily is this free-spirited, she is the Black Swan. She's everything that Natalie Portman should be, or at least what she thinks she should be, to become that character. And, because after they have their girl time, and she's late because her alarm doesn't go off, and she thinks Lily is trying to sabotage her, Lily tells her that didn't happen. You were dropped off. I didn't even stay with you. But then she finds out she was made the understudy, which also, when you see Castell with Kunis, when they're having sex together or getting ready to, and she walks in on it, Castell appears like the character that gives the Swan curse, which is like this, excuse me, this black beaked, big feather kind of monster. I thought that was very cool looking, especially when it's done in like the hallucinations where it's supposed to look like a monster and not like a guy in a costume. But anyway, so then she's made the alternate. Even in the dressing room, in between scenes, Lily sounds like, well, if you're not up to it, you might just want to let me do it. You sure you feeling okay? And there's this confrontation where they kind of get in a fight. Nina pushes her against a mirror. They fall on the floor. And she sees Lily as herself, the Black Swan self, yelling, it's my turn, it's my turn. But then, White Swan Nina gets hands wrapped around her throat by Lily or her doppelganger. And that's when her neck goes all the way up like a swan for a quick second. Which, okay, the scene before that, when she's in her room, that's when we see her legs bend backwards and starts pulling out like black feathers and her eyes go red for the first time. The legs and the neck, I will say, are a little too over the top, even if it's trying to portray, someone going through severe psychosis and hallucinating. But yeah, the skin bumps and everything, I think, work. And so during that tussle, she grabs a mirror shard, stabs Lily, hides her in the bathtub, or in the shower room. And we see her eyes go red, and she's in this makeup, and, she gives this amazing Black Swan performance, which afterwards she passionately kisses Castell. And it is like she completely surrendered herself, became everything that Lily was, or her doppelganger. And, his reaction is like, she did it. But then when she goes back in her dressing room to turn back into the White Swan, she gets a knock on her dressing room door, and it's Lily, saying, congratulations, that was awesome. She got a standing ovation, a rose thrown at her. So that's when she realizes that Lily is still alive, but she's the one with the stab wound. And so it's not so much that it was a struggle of the mind, but, she was also harming herself. Like, she saw herself in the mirror, obviously, attacked the mirror, and then stabbed herself with it. Which we see that, which could have just been a step up from her nervous tics of the scratching and the hangnails. But, it was kind of like a battle of oneself, both in the mind and the body. She attacked herself, essentially. She gives the final performance, and, which is very hypnotic to watch. It's very well done. And then when she falls, that's when Castell comes up and says, you did great. That was perfect. And he notices the blood, and she dies. So she achieved her goal of becoming Swan Princess, pulled it off with, if the film had gone on, probably would have said that she gave the greatest performance. I was kind of waiting for it to snap to reality, kind of like a Saint Maud or Censor ending, where the brilliance is all in her head, and maybe she's actually stumbling and giving a terrible performance. But it didn't do that. So yeah, I think the character of Lily is real and a separate person. up until they go out for drinks. I think after that, the whole rivalry is all in her head. Like, maybe she sees her, but like the way she interprets everything that's happening or being said to her is not real. I guess the only thing I haven't really talked about it, which I'm surprised, is Aronofsky's camera work. I mean, they used 16 millimeter like they did with The Wrestler. He said it's very light, and he wanted the camera to dance. Those were his words, because of course they were. In the beginning, the first time she dances for Castell in rehearsal, when she's doing the spin and like stopping, it's like POV of like a spin, then it stops on Castell, spin, stop on Castell. It was very, you know, I thought that was cool. And then like when there are the dance scenes, yeah, the camera is very flowing, and there are a lot of wide shots that look great. And so yeah, I think it's mostly, which, so yes, I do see it as, you know, Swan Lake is paralleled with her life. But maybe there is a bit of coming of age in there, but I mostly see it as a cautionary tale of, you know, the tragedy of perfection, the toxicity of perfection. You know, because she tries so hard to be perfect, and the way to pull off Black Swan, there's stuff flying everywhere. What she needs to pull off the Black Swan role is to not be textbook perfect, but to just be loose and free and passionate. And yes, I do like this a lot more than Mother. I do think everything about this is done better than Mother, especially with its themes and how those themes are executed, and all the performances and everything. I'll probably always be a sucker for Requiem for a Dream, just because of how, you know, impactful that movie was, especially the last 10-15 minutes. And that to me is still very much, like, I still think of that as the most Aronofsky film as far as his, like, what he does visually and technically. Whereas I think Mother is the most Aronofsky as far as sort of what people think of him, like the pretentious film student. But I really do enjoy this film. I would say this is one of my favorite films or horror films. I mean, I guess technically it's a psychological thriller, but certainly one of my favorite horror films or thrillers of the 2010s and since 2010. I loved it. I was struggling to say if I really enjoyed it or if I loved it, because I don't always like to say I love a film. I think it deserves all the praise that it gets. And kind of like Antichrist, I'm sure this is a movie where you can take a bunch of different things away from it. Everything I've heard makes sense. I mean, I can see where people do get these, you know, where they do get their takeaways. Knowing Aronofsky, I'm sure he does have like a set meaning that he'll probably say is deeper than anything anyone else has come up with. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Black Swan. I'm glad I checked it out. I don't know why it took me so long, but big fan of this film. Tried to make these reviews shorter, but I failed. But so anyway, thank you for watching.